Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another Rookie Card Collector 123 video. In today's episode, we're going to take a closer look at the road to 310 from my previous episode, how I assembled the most diverse Hall of Fame baseball rookies collection of all time on a budget. So today we're going to take a look at, I gave a high-level overview of how the whole process went for me from beginning to end. Today we're going to take a look at more specifics, a lot of the items that I picked up, a lot of the upgrades I made over the years, how things started, how things finished. We're going to look at primarily the some of the really high-end upper tier Hall of Famers, as well as a few pieces of lesser-known Hall of Famers, more obscure players, but also some more really unique items that you might not have been familiar with before, which enabled me to save the funds that I needed to eventually complete the collection of 310 Hall of Famers. So the first player we're going to take a look at today is Hank Aaron. And the same theme is going to sort of follow through with most of these players. You're going to find that the initial card or collectible that I picked up for them tended to be much more of a mainstream item. And then you'll see how by the final version of my representation for that Hall of Famer, how my thinking changed over the years and my collection evolved. So Hank Aaron, the first rookie I picked up, following along with how I began the collection, I was looking for the post-war Hall of Famers, primarily almost all tops and Bowman. So as you can imagine, my choice for the Hank Aaron was the 1954 tops. I picked that up in a low-grade 1 condition, if I recall, probably had creases in it. And I needed to stick to my price range of looking to stay within 10% and under of the high Beckett value. This is as of 2004 when I started the collection. So the 54 tops was the first one I picked up. At that time, maybe that was a thousand. Well, no, the high Beckett column was probably, I would say, somewhere in the 8,000, 10,000 range. So the card I picked up was probably somewhere in the 800 to 1,000 range in a 1 condition. So my Aaron spot was filled with the 54 tops. Not too far down the road, maybe within a year or two later, what I started to do was some of the tops cards that I had picked up the very first year I was building the collection, the tops and the Bowman post-war rookies. I decided that it was sort of too easy to get those. There wasn't much of a challenge. It took a little bit of money, and any show you went to, pretty much, you can find almost all of them. So I decided I want to expand and look at other options other than the mainstream card. So I did some research, player by player. And for Aaron, I found there was a 1954 Johnston cookie. So within a couple of years, I was able to pick up a low-grade Johnston cookie, also probably in a 1 condition type of car that was cheaper than the tops, probably about half the price or so at that time. So as I would follow through with all my Hall of Famers, I would only keep 1 of each in order to stay on my budget and allow me to continue progressing through the collection. So I sold the tops, Aaron. I bought the Johnston cookies, which got me about half of my money back, which I was able to use for other future rookie purchases. Within another year or two of that, I found a Marshall Merrill Braves Hank Aaron. These were much more obscure and scarce, more so than the Johnston cookies, definitely much more than the tops. So the Marshall Merrill I found, they're about 8.5 by 11. It's a black and white, kind of a line drawing of the Milwaukee Braves players. They were made in 54. And the Aaron I found was raw. These were too large at the time. There was no holder large enough to encapsulate them. so I was not able to get this one graded. But Beckett was starting to do a lot of similar size items. So my plan was to buy it raw, submit it to Beckett, and have them grade it, which is ultimately what I did. The Marshall Merrill was much cheaper than the Johnston cookies, which I had in the collection at that point. And that was, I believe it was under $100. It was probably somewhere in that range. So again, I ended up selling the Johnston cookies, replacing it with the Marshall Merrill, saved a few $100s more, which got more funds for me to spend on more rookie purchases in the future. And all these items now, the tops, the Johnston cookie and the Marshall Merrill, these are all 1954s. There was also a spick and span, but that one was not going to save me any money, and I was okay with the Marshall Merrill. So fast forward now till around 2010. Now I've gotten more into some of the Negro League guys and some of the more obscure collectibles like premiums and scorecards and broadsides and various things like that. And I was looking through an auction catalog one day, and I came across a 1953 to 54 Puerto Rican Winter League team composite of the Caguas Ball Club during that winter season. And Hank Aaron was one of the players, the star player noted on the premium in the auction description. So I thought that was really cool. And, those types of things can be one of a kind. Maybe there's a couple or a few of them, but definitely much less than any other Aaron piece out there. So I decided I would go after the Caguas premium. And fortunately for me, I was able to win the item at the auction. So then I sold the Marshall Merrill, kept the Caguas premium, and now I had a 53 to 54 Aaron, which was, to me, was a year earlier than any of his other 54 issues. Close to that same time, a postcard which I knew about came up for auction as well. It was a 1952 Indianapolis Clowns postcard picturing Aaron in a batting stance. But it was not a real photograph. It was sort of like a cartoon drawing with Aaron's face superimposed on the body. As these Indianapolis Clowns team from that era had several of these cartoon-like postcards made up, sort of a team issue. I believe by Sid Pollock, who was the owner, promoter of the Indianapolis Clowns. And this was in the early 50s, late 40s, early 50s. The Clowns were not so much a official Negro League team. They were more of one of those barnstorming teams, but they were also a showmanship type of club, similar to the Harlem Globetrotters were in basketball. So Aaron spent one part of one season there in Indianapolis, and that's when that postcard was made. So it came up for auction close to the same time as the Caguas premium, which I had paid around $1,000 for. The postcard came up. It was in a hunt auction, and I was an active bidder up until toward the end of it, but it ended up selling for $6,000. And, for my budget and needing to collect 310 guys and not just Hank Aaron, it went beyond what I would be able to spend. So I did not end up getting it. So that would have been a year earlier than the Caguas premium, but I was happy with that premium that I had. And that would be my final version in the collection for Hank Aaron when I sold everything in 2014, was that 53-54 Caguas team premium. The next player we're going to talk about is a 19th century guy, Adrian Cap Anson. He was probably the most prominent, at least hitter, star player during the 19th century. He began his career with the Philadelphia Ball Club at that time it was the National Association. A couple of years later, it became the National League. And then Anson, shortly after that, moved on to Chicago. The name of the team changed. They were the Orphans for a while. Ultimately, that Chicago team that Anson played on would become the Chicago Cubs of the National League by the turn of the century. But Anson was a first 3,000 hit club member, very high career batting average. Like I said, probably the best all around hitter of the 19th century. And unfortunately, had some other issues, personality issues, and had some issues with allowing African Americans to participate in professional baseball games. He was one of the primary reasons why the Negro Leagues ended up being established as an entirely separate entity from Major League Baseball. Cap Anson was a big, very big against allowing the black ball players to play on the same team or even the same field as his club. So, based on his prominence, they didn't through the turn of the century until integration. So Anson, the first item I had for him, I bought was an 1887 Buckner gold coin. That was a tobacco card. It was one of the tobacco issues that came out around the same time as the more famous All Judge N172 set, the largest set ever produced of baseball cards. So Anson, I picked up the Buckner Gold coin. At that time, that was like a $400 item, $400 card, something like that. And I was interested in the Old Judge. Those were much more expensive, so I stuck with my 1887. Again, my primary objective for upgrading my collection was going to be not to get something in better condition or a better card, better quote unquote card, but really just to get something earlier than what I had before. So I had the Anson. Eventually, a few years later, as I got deeper into research and all, I came across an 1886, which was a year earlier. It was another tobacco issue. These were a much larger card, and they were a team composite. They were put out by Lorillard Tobacco, and they would have a team image there. So Anson was with Chicago at this point. So it was an 1886 Chicago that had Anson. Also had John Clarkson and Mike King Kelly. So that would be a theme that I would also follow quite often as I built my collection, was I would look for cards like that had multiple Hall of Famers on the card. Because if I was able to do it and pick that up and that card represented something earlier than what I had already, now I can not just only sell my Cap Anson Buckner Gold coin, but now I can also sell my Mike Kelly and John Clarkson cards as well. So I can sell three of them, get all the funds from those three cards that I purchased previously, and just by acquiring the 1886 team card. So I would do that very often, as we'll talk about throughout my stories. Um, so I picked up the Anson 1886, and that was at that time those were probably a couple of thousand, 1,000 to 2,000, somewhere in that range. And of course, everything I was looking at for was primarily lower grade. So I picked up the Anson. I had that in the collection for a few more years. And by around 2010 or 2011, it's getting later in the collection, I started looking at some woodcuts. Woodcuts were baseball sort of line drawing images that were printed in newspapers in the 19th century. They began in the mid 19th century, 1860s or so, and they would run all the way through to the turn of the century. So I was able to find an 1874 Philadelphia newspaper, which had a woodcut of again, it was more like a composite image. So it had several different players from the Philadelphia National Association team in full body poses, including Anson. And that was, I believe it was a year after his professional baseball debut. So it was 1874. The item I had was 1886. So obviously, for my objective, getting the earliest possible, that was a no-brainer. So I picked up the Anson, and woodcuts tend to be very inexpensive. So I picked up the Anson for probably no more than $100. So now I couldn't really sell the Chicago piece that I had, the Lori Lard, because it also had Kelly and Clarkson. So until I picked up images of those two, I still had to keep that one because I needed the other two players that were on there. But that filled the hole in my Anson collection, and of course, as you could imagine, I never found anything earlier than that 1874 Harper's Weekly Philadelphia woodcut. So that became my final Anson representation in the collection. So now, so far, we've got the first one, Aaron, was a premium of a Winter League club in Puerto Rico. The second one is a Harper's Weekly newspaper woodcut, a composite of the Philadelphia team. So as you can see right away, just from the first two items and the first two players we're talking about, the diversity of what this collection would become. What started out as collecting the 54 Topps Aaron post-war rookies was going to evolve into many, many unique items, unique types of items, and definitely enjoyed the entire journey, and lots more to come. So next one I'm going to look at is Cool Papa Bell. So Cool Papa Bell was a Negro League ball player. He started in the early 1920s. Came up with the St. Louis Stars in the first official Negro National League. And Bell would stick with the Negro League baseball as well as Winter League ball in Latin America all the way up till near 1950, the mid 40s at least. So he spent more than 2 decades in Negro League baseball, widely regarded as the fastest Negro League player in history, and possibly faster than any major league player in history. Bell was not a power hitter, as you could imagine, but he was a well over 300 career average. Obviously stole lots of bases. He played the outfield, super fast, great defensive player, and played on a number of championship teams in the Negro Leagues, as well as Latin America. So Bell, as is the case with all the Negro League players, they never printed any cards of the Negro League teams or the ball players during the U.S. Negro League days, which ran from the 1920 to it ran past 1947. But after Jackie Robinson integrated Major League Baseball, the quality of talent started to drop off there. So Bell played in Negro Leagues, so never any cards made of him during his career that were career contemporary. So the closest thing to a rookie card, a true rookie card, would have been his 1974 Lachlan Old Time Black Stars, which was a set put out by a artist named Robert Lachlan in the 70s. He put out a number of different sets with different themes. He did two Negro League sets, one in 74 and one in 78. The 74 set would include almost all the biggest name stars like Josh Gibson, Satchel Paige, Oscar Charleston, Cool Papa Bell. The 78 set, the guys that he was not able to get included in the 74 set, he included pretty much everybody else that was significant in Negro League Baseball, the second set. So I had the Lachlan set I had picked up at a card show probably around 2006 when I started getting into the Negro League guys and adding them to the collection because so many cards in there were true rookie cards of the Negro League guys without any other cards ever made. Some of the guys played in Latin America, countries like Cuba and Puerto Rico and Venezuela and Mexico. And some of them had cards that were printed in those countries. And it's debatable whether some collectors don't consider those rookie cards because they were made overseas in other countries. A lot of collectors do consider those rookie cards. I fall into the second category. But so Bell, like I said, during his playing days didn't have anything. So I had the 74 Lachlan as part of the set. And as I got further along in the collection for the Negro Leaguers, I started to not be so happy with having all these 1974 cards of guys that played in the 1900s, 19 teens, 1920s, these cards were made like 50 years later. That was not real exciting to me. And of course, there was no cards to collect from their playing days outside of the few that had Winter League cards, but many of the players did not. So I decided, what can I do to fill in those slots rather than the Lachlan cards? So I decided to expand my collection. This is now probably around 2007, so about 3 or 4 years into the collection. I'm going to expand the collection for those players that fall into the Negro League, Pioneers, and Executive categories. So this way, my objective then would become to get playing days specifically in the earliest playing days possible for all of these guys, not necessarily cards. So I wasn't really looking for rookie cards anymore. It was more like rookie collectibles or the earliest collectible I can find. So for Cool Papa Bell, I started searching and I came across a 1922 in an auction. St. Louis Stars, I told you he started his career there. So his very first season with the Stars, 1922, I came across a team photo that was up for auction. And it had not only Bell on there, but it had Willie Wells, a very early image of him. And it had Mule Suttles, also a very early image. And both of those were Negro League Hall of Famers as well. So if I was able to pick that up, I would fill 3 holes in my collection with that one pickup. So I knew this was going to cost me some money, but I had been downsizing, and saving funds from a lot of other players where I got out of more expensive items and got into stuff that was much, much cheaper. And the trade-off was I'd have extra money to spend on something like this St. Louis Stars team photo. So fortunately, I was able to win the team photo in the auction. So that filled 3 holes there, and I was able to sell my Bell, my Suttles, and my Willie Wells Lachlan cards. And now I had the one item from 1922 instead of 3 separate cards from 1974. That was 50 years after these guys were playing. So that's a third example of how my collection evolved. So now I have a Type 1 original team photo from the Negro Leagues. So that's the third different type of piece of memorabilia that I collected just from Hank Aaron, Cool Papa Bell, and Cap Anson. So I don't want these videos to run too long. There's going to be many more highlights. I'm going to take you through my collection. At some point down the road later on, I will probably go player by player through the entire 310. Some of them, there's not a lot of stories to tell. Some of them, I bought the mainstream tops card at the beginning of my journey. And the end of the journey, I still had the mainstream tops card. So some of them are not going to have long stories, but many of them do. Many of them I'm not going to cover right now just because these videos will continue on much too long. So I'm going to cut this video off for today. We're already over 20 minutes. And I'll continue on tomorrow, the next episode. I'm going to continue alphabetically. I started with Hank Aaron. And just going through the real high-level upper tier Hall of Fame highlights from the collection at this time for now. And later on, possibly come back to reviewing the entire 310. So 10-year collection took a long time to assemble. It's probably going to take me a long time to summarize. Unfortunately, I did not have the foresight to document and keep pictures of everything that I had in the collection. So I don't have anything to show. I'm really just talking about it. But I think you can get a pretty good picture, a pretty good idea of the type of collectibles that were there. So anyway, hope you enjoyed today's video. Have a great day, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.